like, I think that's something people tend to forget. I've brought this up a couple of times in other episodes, but a lot of people tend to forget that the people that are maintaining these open source repos are just people. Like, you see that screen name there, you see that profile picture, and it's easy to forget that the person doing that work actually is a person and has their own goals, has their own intentions. This played out really well with the thing with GNOME dropping X11 in the future. Like, that thread is an absolute disaster minefield. Or the Wayland positioning thread that I saw you comment on, the EXT placement, I think it's called now.
Yep.
Like, that's a minefield. Even though, like, they're all, like, contributors there, they're, like, a lot of these people there are, like, very active in this space. Like, you could clearly see that a lot of people were getting emotional about it, were getting, like, very attached to their position and not really willing to have a discussion about it. It's like, I'm just gonna yell about what my perspective is, and eventually if I yell enough, people are going to listen to me. Where that's just not gonna happen. Like, especially some of the most, like, hot-headed people there just needed to take some time away from that specific issue, come back to it later, and just remember the fact that, you know, everybody here is just trying to, especially in that, the Wayland placement case, like, everybody here is just trying to make the Linux desktop better. It's just that there is a lot of different perspectives on how it can be made better, and they don't really align with each other.
Wayland definitely had a problem of a lot of talking, not a lot of listening.
Mm-hmm.
And a big technical problem in Wayland, where there's always tension, is all about whether applications should be built around Wayland or Wayland needs to accommodate the existing requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And those two are at odds with each other. There needs to be balance, there needs to be compromise, but there's not a lot of understanding each other's perspectives and achieving that.
Mm-hmm. And
part of this is, like, a social problem behind this, is the people who hang out in Hash Wayland on Matrix and the main people on the GitLab project, they're all excited about Wayland.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they're in that mindset that everyone's excited about Wayland. Everyone should be doing is porting to Wayland and doing it just for Wayland. And if you're not in that space, if you're trying to, in my position, I'm trying to make this multi-platform toolkit. I can't have Wayland specialities in a multi-platform toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much between this fixed API, which is immutable from a Qt API, and this Wayland protocols, which is this fixed, immutable API-ish. And then I'm in the middle trying to connect these two things up. And it's an impossible job.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not done right, applications break. And doing an impossible job right is a frustrating position to be in.
I did see what you said. Let's see if I can find the thread. I don't know exactly what you said, but what is your perspective on that protocol? Actually, for anyone who didn't see my video on it, the idea is that right now in Wayland, there is no way for applications to position themselves. So all positioning is up to the responsibility of the compositor. So if you have an application like GIMP in its multi-window mode, and the compositor doesn't have any rules for how those windows can be placed, like, you might have a situation where instead of the windows being placed, you know, you have, like, your main GIMP, canvas with all the toolbars on the side. It might decide, okay, let's just spawn them all on top of each other, which is obviously not the intended behavior that you're supposed to be seeing.
Yeah.
So what this would be doing is giving that sort of placement ability that exists on Windows, that exists on macOS, that exists on Linux with X11 to Wayland as well. But the Wayland devs sort of have very different opinions about how this should be done. Clients shouldn't be positioning themselves. All of these different perspectives on it. But what is your perspective, at least? 'Cause I know you did say that it's not like a consistent thing among KD developers. Like, it's not like everybody just agrees on this is what we're gonna do. But what's yours?
Sure. I mean, it's important. I don't want to speak on behalf of the other Quinn devs who do have different opinions. So, particularly, I'm in this position of this cute Wayland maintainer. And the thing that Wayland's lacked a lot of is thinking about transition. Because people sometimes say when apps port to Wayland, apps don't do porting to Wayland. Toolkits do porting to Wayland. Applications get taken along for your ride. So, kfloppy, that floppy disk formatter, works on Wayland because why wouldn't it, right? It's a new version of Qt, everything just works. But that means all the calls that it tries to do need to do something. And its absolute positioning comes up in all these different places. So pop-ups, if you open like a file menu, you want it to appear, it's a new window, you want it to appear just beneath the file menu. And Wayland has a separate protocol for that, where you give it your relative position. And we can fake that. On a Qt level, we pretend the window's in the top left corner as far as the applications code is concerned. And then when it places a menu, it tries to place it in an absolute position, and then we translate it. In theory, that works fine, right? But then as soon as you get near a screen edge, you want the menu to be on the other side. You want to know about, oh, I'm going to go off the screen, I should be somewhere else. And Wayland, brilliant on paper, has this protocol where you give it all of this semantic information. You say, if I hit a screen edge, here are my constraints, here's what I want you to do instead, slide the window, or flip to the other side of this rectangle, and you don't give it a point, you give it a whole rectangle. And on paper, it is fantastic. It covers everything. And I remember reading it thinking, oh, this is brilliant. I can come up with all these hypothetical situations in my head where it fixes problems that were unfixable on X11. And the reality is a lot of problems, or real world problems, which are only hypothetically fixable. Because from that Qt point of view, where I am, I can't just magic this information out of nowhere. I can't work out what the client wanted to do. I've only just got this one point that it concluded. And that's a huge challenge. That's why our pop-ups are sometimes off. There's a whole issue of clients don't know their own positions, but do know their screens. So if you have your screens in a weird position, so the top left corner isn't on a screen, all applications were going, oh, my menu doesn't fit, I'll move it. But because that's not where your window actually was, it just meant the menu just went flying off into the middle of nowhere when we tried to map between absolute and relative and whatnot. So it's great on paper, but it requires applications having to change. And that's an uphill battle. And you need to think about its transitions. I think a good comparison is Flatpak. Flatpak, you're introducing a new way of packaging, but if thought about a transition, you can just go to Flatc or you can just check some boxes, and if you wanted to access all your home folder, you press a button, it accesses all your home folder. And then the application can opt into these portals afterwards.
Right.
Whereas with Wayland, it's let's get things perfect from the get-go. And that's the only thing they're trying to accomplish. They've only got this one path of, we're only going to do the right thing. And granted, all this stuff on Wayland is better on paper, but it requires all of these changes to just magically happen, which you can't just get out of nowhere.
I hadn't thought of it like
so
in that fashion. Yeah, having that. Yeah, no, it is trying to like just be this revolutionary change without that transitionary step, which is fine for the open source tooling especially, but when you start getting into like, you know, you were part of the Wayland video bridge stuff, that was a problem that needed to be fixed. Just doing things in a perfect way where there's no like transitionary goals, like it ends up just Wayland's got this bad reputation because for so long, basic things have just been broken because
Yeah.
there's just not been a way to do it.
Yeah, so it's an absolute position. It comes up again and again in all these different places. So you mentioned with the pop-up windows. Any window with a splash screen, you want it somewhere in the middle. And that might be a default placement, but it might not. And on Windows, on OS X, on X11, you just set a flag and it's done. On Wayland, there is a proposed protocol, and it replaces, instead of just setting a flag on existing window, it's a new window type. And I made a patch in Qt, and instead of being one line like it was on all the other platforms, my patch was 2,000 lines. And then I was so embarrassed of having to submit this to the Qt devs who don't know Wayland that well. And then I had to explain to them, why is this a 2,000 line patch? And then I just didn't bother because they would ask, what does this do better? And then I wouldn't be able to have an answer because the idea is, from a pure Wayland perspective, you don't have API calls that don't make sense. You shouldn't be able to put a pop-up on a splash screen. But because Qt and every other toolkit abstracts that, from an application level point of API, you still have all of these options. So instead of it failing at a protocol level, it fails in my Qt Wayland backend level.
Okay.
So it doesn't really solve much. But then I'm still left with my splash screens being wrong.